I was born in a house that never really wanted me. It's just the naked truth that took me years to accept. I grew up in a suburb of Richmond, Virginia. My mother kept saying, almost like someone daydreaming, that one day she would have a daughter. I was little, but I understood perfectly well what that one day meant. I wasn't what she wanted. My father agreed with everything, always excited about the possibility of that future daughter, talking about her as if she were a real person, someone already on the way. They talked about this imaginary girl right in front of me with no hesitation, as if I wasn't there, sitting on the carpet. One scene stayed burned in my memory. I must have been around 8. I was putting together a puzzle on the floor when I heard my father say, "When our little girl arrives, everything is going to change." My mother answered with a sigh I already knew well. Yes, finally. They smiled at each other as if they had received a divine promise. I kept fitting the pieces together without looking up. There were no screams, but there was something worse, constant indifference. My mother's distant look whenever I showed her a drawing, the way my father changed the subject when I tried to talk about something that happened at school, birthdays that felt more like a formality than a special moment. I tried to compensate. I got good grades, helped with cleaning, avoided making any kind of noise or mess. Sometimes it felt like the less I existed, the more comfortable things were for them. Even then, that feeling of not belonging never went away. I slept imagining that if I disappeared, maybe they would finally feel complete, because in their minds, the family would only truly begin when that daughter finally arrived. I remember one afternoon at school when the teacher asked, "Who is the person who believes in you the most?" The whole classroom answered almost in unison. Mom, Dad, Grandma, Aunt. I didn't say anything. I couldn't think of anyone. When the teacher insisted, I made up the name of a classmate who barely talked to me. It was the best I could come up with in the moment. I grew up like that. To them, I was just the before the real one child. My sister was born at the Richmond Municipal Hospital, and I remember that day not because I was excited, but because the house felt strangely energized, almost vibrating. My parents had never acted that way about anything related to me. There were cupcakes on the kitchen table, pink ribbons hanging from the staircase railing, and my mother kept repeating the word "finally" as if she had won the lottery. I was 15. I spent most of the day sitting in the living room, listening to my mother and father moving around the house with a kind of energy I had never seen before. They seemed like they were getting ready to welcome a celebrity, not a baby. Every detail had been planned in advance. Little outfits separated by color and texture, an imported crib, the bedroom wall painted in pastel shades that I had helped repaint with a second coat without anyone saying, "Thank you." When she arrived, everything changed in a way I didn't even know how to name at the time. I remember the first time I saw my sister, wrapped in a soft blanket, my mother holding her as if she were made of crystal, my father taking pictures nonstop. They barely noticed I was standing in the doorway, and when they did, it was only to say, "Careful not to wake her." From that day on, the conversations, the laughter, the attention, everything went to her. My mother talked to her in a soft, gentle voice, the kind of tone she had never used with me. My father, who rarely cared about anything I did, started documenting every movement the baby made. I would listen from the hallway, trying to understand why it hurt so much. At the same time, I felt ridiculous for feeling pain over a baby who had no fault in anything. I was a shadow walking around my own house. I started eating later so I wouldn't disrupt her routine. I studied in my room with the door closed because any noise I made seemed like an inconvenience. Literally, anything of mine had to be adjusted so her life could be perfect. Before, family gatherings were lukewarm, polite conversations. After she was born, it was like everyone around us started seeing my parents as a complete couple, finally fulfilled. Distant relatives gave me pats on the shoulder saying, "Now you have a little sister, take good care of her." What I heard instead was, "Now you've lost the little space you had." With time, I stopped trying to participate. I stopped sitting at the table with them, stopped telling them anything about school, stopped expecting any kind of closeness. I'd watch my parents talk about her with a passion that seemed infinite, and I'd think, I was never that. I'll never be that. It's not that I wanted to be the center of anything. I just wanted to exist to them. When I turned 18, my fate was sealed in a conversation that lasted less than 10 minutes. It was a Saturday afternoon around 3 p.m. My parents called me in, but there was no cake, no congratulations, nothing. Just a cold explanation. The house was getting cramped, I was already an adult, and it was time for me to find my own path. They needed to prioritize my sister's routine, who now was a few years old and required space, stability, and focus. I tried to argue. I said I was finishing school, that I had nowhere to go, that I just needed a few months to save some money. They looked at me with the blank expression of people dealing with an administrative problem, not their son. My father said they had done their part. My mother said I needed to grow up. And that was it. Out of nowhere, I was standing at the front door with my clothes stuffed into 2 bags and 3 improvised boxes, while they wished me good luck in a hurry, worried about not waking my sister from her afternoon nap. The first week I slept on Anthony's couch, a classmate who lived in an apartment far too small for the number of people constantly coming and going. His couch was old and hard, but for me it was practically a presidential suite. I kept thinking, I'm alone. It's just me now. And that terrified me and gave me a strange sense of freedom at the same time. I worked wherever I could, washing dishes at a cheap fast food place, pulling overnight shifts at a convenience store, unloading trucks in a warehouse that always looked like it was about to collapse. It didn't matter. What mattered was making any money at all. It was that, or go hungry. And honestly, there were nights when hunger won. I'd tell myself I wasn't that hungry, that I could save a little more, that I'd be fine. But I knew I was just lying to avoid facing reality. After a few weeks on Anthony's couch, things became unsustainable. Not because he complained, he never did, but because I started feeling like I was taking up too much space, living off his improvisation. So I rented a room in a shared apartment. It was in a cheap neighborhood near a worn-down housing complex with poorly lit streets. The first time I closed the door of that room, even with leaks in the ceiling, I felt a strange, almost childish pride. Of course, living there was chaos. Sharing a kitchen with complete strangers who didn't wash their own dishes, waking up to loud music during the week, dealing with people using things I preferred to pretend I didn't see. Over time, I built a small network of people who pulled me up, even if quietly. Anthony kept being my anchor. Janelle, who worked with me at the restaurant, sometimes shared improvised meals with me made from leftover ingredients. Marcus, who lived in the same building, helped me find temp jobs whenever I ran out of money. Each one of those people filled small spaces inside me that I had always assumed would stay empty forever. These people became my chosen family, even if no one ever said that out loud. We helped each other because everyone there knew what it was like to have nowhere to go. No one was truly doing well, but no one would let the other drown alone. After a few years on that roller coaster of jobs, I finally got something more stable. A permanent position at a logistics warehouse that paid enough for me to pay rent on time and buy real food. With that job, I rented a tiny studio near the north end of the city. It was small, but decent. It had heating, hot water, and I could buy my own things. Life went on like that. Work, bills, small pleasures like buying a hot coffee before a shift. Nights watching an old TV sitting on the floor because I still didn't have a couch. And with time, I started thinking that maybe that was the best I'd ever get. I was almost believing it when I got the call that turned everything upside down. I was getting home after work close to 7 p.m. when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I usually don't answer unknown numbers, but something inside me tightened that day. When I picked up and heard my mother's voice, after so many years of absolute silence, my whole body froze. Her voice was different, shaky, and for a moment I thought someone had died. She said my name slowly, and then, "We need to talk to you. It's about your sister." I didn't even know how old my sister was at that point. I didn't keep up with vacations, birthdays, anything. My mother started blurting out disconnected phrases, talking way too fast, that my sister was out of control, that she had gotten involved in dangerous things, that they were at their limit. I was listening, but not absorbing. She passed the phone to my father without warning. His tone was harsher, almost irritated. He started by saying that I was family, that I had responsibilities, that it was a difficult moment and they needed my support. He talked as if we spoke every week, as if he hadn't kicked me out of the house at 18. I was so stunned I only managed to say, "What's going on?" My father launched into a dramatic speech about how my sister was running away from home, getting mixed up with the wrong people, skipping classes, causing problems at school, and even trying substances. The call ended with them asking, almost demanding, that I meet with them to talk in person. I almost hung up right there, but a part of me, a part I thought had died when I was kicked out, stirred. Curiosity, guilt, fear, I don't know, maybe all of it. I agreed to meet them the next day, at a cafe near downtown Richmond. I got there a few minutes early and sat there trying to understand how I had ended up in that situation again. When my parents walked in, I was shocked. They looked smaller, more tired, like the years had run them over hard. My mother had deep bags under her eyes. My father looked more hunched than I remembered. For a second, I felt a flicker of pity, then it disappeared. They sat across from me without really greeting me, without asking how I was. Nothing. It was like I was a tool they needed to use. Nothing more. My mother started talking, fidgeting with her hands, explaining that my sister was straying, that they'd tried programs, counseling, private consultations, but nothing worked. As they spoke, I noticed something strange. They weren't actually worried about her. They were worried about the size of the problem, the financial weight, the mess it was creating in their lives. It was less about their daughter's pain, and more about the chaos it caused for them. And then came the real blow. They wanted me to help financially. They wanted me to take on part of the responsibility because they were at the edge of debt. They talked about selling the car, about overdue bills. My father even said, "We're a family. We can't let your sister fall apart." I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "Where was this family when you kicked me out?" My mother looked away. My father hardened his voice and said that was in the past. In the past for them. For me, it was a living scar. They insisted, pushed, tried to guilt trip me, tried to blame me, tried to remind me of blood ties. All I could think about was the 18-year-old kid with 2 bags of clothes and no goodbye. When I left that cafe, I felt like something huge and rotten was bubbling to the surface. And that call wasn't really about my sister. It was about them sinking and wanting to drag me with them. I just had no idea how much deeper it was going to go. The call from my sister came on a Tuesday night around 9. I was sitting on the floor of my studio eating reheated pasta straight from the pot when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. The voice on the other end was young, and she said my full name. That's when I realized it was her, my sister, now 16. The last time I had seen that baby wrapped in a lilac blanket, she was now speaking to me like she was interrogating a stranger. And honestly, that's exactly what I was to her. She started slowly, half polite, half tense, asking if I had a minute to talk. I said yes, of course, trying to control the mix of nervousness and curiosity running through me. And before I could ask anything, she began following a visible script, like she had memorized every word so she wouldn't lose control of the conversation. First came the dramatic speech about how our parents were at their limit, how they were sacrificing everything for her, how the whole situation was unbearable. Then came the request, actually the demand, that I help them. She spoke like an adult scolding another adult. She said I was being selfish, that I had abandoned the family when they needed me the most, that I had left home out of pride, out of stubbornness because I didn't want to share the attention. With every sentence, my stomach tightened. Those words weren't hers. They were theirs. It was like hearing the way my parents used to talk about me back when I still lived there, as if I were an inconvenient problem, a nuisance who decided to leave and live my life without looking back. That story had never been true, but now it was alive in her voice, shaped over years as if it were absolute fact. When I tried to explain, she cut me off. She didn't want to hear it. She said I had always been like that, distant, cold, unable to think about anyone but myself. I almost laughed in disbelief. I let her talk until she finished her rehearsed monologue, and when she finally fell silent, I asked, "Is that what our parents told you? That I left because I didn't want to share attention?" And she confirmed it. It was clear she believed every bit of it, every crumb of the story they had fed her. That was the first time I felt anger toward her. Not because she was harsh with me, but because she was so deep in their lie that she couldn't imagine another version of the truth. I needed to confirm with my parents, and fast. I called them right after, my hands shaking. My father picked up with the same impatience I remembered too well. Before he could start with any speech, I asked, "Did you tell her I abandoned you because I didn't want to share attention?" The silence that followed told me everything. It wasn't surprise, it was guilt. My mother tried jumping in first, saying it wasn't exactly like that things were complicated, that she was just a child and needed a simple explanation. My father, more blunt, ended up admitting it was better for her to believe something she could understand. They erased the fact that they abandoned me and put the blame on me, the disposable son, turning me into the convenient villain. It wasn't just about the story they rewrote. It was about entire years during which my sister grew up believing I had turned my back on her before she even learned to say my name. Right there, I learned that I hadn't only lost my parents, I had lost the chance to be her brother. And that hurt in a way even the kid kicked out at 18 had never felt. Update 1. I spent a few days stewing over everything before I gathered the courage to call my sister again. I was afraid she wouldn't answer, afraid she'd be even more hostile, afraid to confirm the damage was irreversible. When I finally hit the call button, it was a Sunday afternoon around 5 p.m. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was neutral, not aggressive. It sounded like she had been expecting, without admitting it, that I would call again. I started slow, saying I wanted to explain my side of the story, not for her to forgive me, but so she could have the full truth. For a moment, I thought she was going to hang up. She let out a, "Yeah, go ahead," that sounded like she was holding her breath. I told her everything. I explained that I had been raised like a temporary child, someone they never actually wanted, that I spent years hearing that one day the perfect daughter would come. I told her that when she was born, I simply stopped existing in that house. I told her about being kicked out at 18, about the improvised bags, about the door closing behind me without any hug, without anyone missing me. After a long silence, she asked, "So you didn't leave because you didn't want to share attention?" I felt a lump in my throat and replied, "I left because they made me leave." From that moment on, something shifted. She asked me, for the first time, to tell her more. Then it was her turn. She started describing small things, almost ordinary. Constant arguments between our parents, the heavy atmosphere, the way they always seemed nervous or distracted. She told me our dad spent entire nights out saying he needed time, but in reality he was going to casinos around Richmond. She said he came back angry, sometimes slamming doors, sometimes breaking little things, like remote controls, cups. Mom wasn't any better. Compulsive shopping, hidden bags at the back of the closet, expensive items she resold days later to pay other bills. My sister said that when she was around 8 or 9, she started noticing food disappearing, late payments piling up, friends stopping their visits. She told me they fought about money almost every night, arguing over amounts, accusing each other of being the reason everything was falling apart. And the worst part, she explained that, for some reason, they placed everything on her shoulders, as if she were the center of the chaos, as if their choices had nothing to do with the financial hole they'd dug. Hearing that hurt in a strange way. It wasn't exactly surprising. My parents had always been masters at shifting blame. But hearing the same story repeat itself, now crushing someone else, felt like déjà vu in the worst way. I asked if they treated her badly. She said they never actually hurt her for real, but they yelled a lot, pressured her constantly, made her feel like she was responsible for everything that went wrong. She was growing up in the same emotional environment that shaped me, except now with an extra layer. Parents desperate, drowning in debt, deteriorating under their own vices. At the end of the conversation, she said quietly, "I didn't know they treated you like that. I thought you left because you didn't like us." That sentence cut straight through me. It was the first time I felt that maybe, I had a chance to be her brother for real. When we hung up, I realized the whole thing was a slow-motion disaster unfolding for years, and I felt genuine fear about what else might still be buried in that house. Her call came in the middle of the night, around 3 a.m. When I saw her name on the screen, my whole body snapped awake instantly. "It's me. Don't talk loud, please." I asked what was going on, but she kept repeating that she couldn't talk much, that she had to be quick. And then she said, "They found out we talked." I asked what they had done. She whispered that our parents had taken her phone for hours, that they had yelled and locked her bedroom door so she wouldn't lose control again. I tried to ask more, but she was too nervous. She said our mom was out of her mind, that our dad broke a picture frame, that both of them said she was letting herself be manipulated by me, that they weren't going to let me destroy the family again. Deep down, I already knew our parents were never stable, but I had underestimated how far they could go. She said she was sitting in the bathroom on the floor, with the door locked, speaking softly. The image of her there, hiding, filled me with urgency. My first instinct was to grab my keys and drive straight to their house, but I couldn't go there. If I showed up in the middle of the night, my parents might completely lose it. They could turn on her. They could turn on me too. I asked if she was hurt. She said no. "Listen, you're not safe there." She went silent. The silence of someone who knows it's true but doesn't want to admit it. I asked if she had any trustworthy adult in her life, a teacher, a neighbor, a relative, but she said our parents had burned all those bridges with their controlling behavior. No one came close anymore. I wasn't going to be able to help her alone, and if I waited, something worse could happen. I told her, "I'm going to do something. I'm not leaving you there, but you need to trust me now." She asked what I was going to do. "I'm calling Child Protective Services. They can go in. They can take you out if they have to. They can actually protect you." She said she was scared. I told her I was scared too. Before hanging up, she apologized. She said she didn't want to be a burden. That sentence shattered me, because it was exactly what I used to tell myself at her age. I told her she wasn't a burden at all. I told her she was my sister, and that I would never turn my back on her again. I knew that from that moment on, there was no turning back. Calling protective services wasn't a small decision, but it was that, or letting a kid stay trapped in the same silent hell I grew up in. I picked up my phone, dialed the number, and filed the report. Update 2. I couldn't sleep the night I made the report. Late the next morning, must have been around 10, my phone rang. It was the Child Protective Services number. The social worker said they had sent a team to my parents' house. She said, "We found clear signs of neglect and an emotionally unsafe environment." I asked about her. The worker said my sister was scared but physically fine, and that as a precaution she would be removed from the house that same day. She said that since I was the closest available adult relative, I could request temporary custody. I went completely silent. Temporary custody. Me, the kid they kicked out of that same house, now considered the safe person. The social worker asked if I had the minimum conditions to take her in. I looked around. A tiny studio, a simple mattress, 2 shelves, an old microwave. It wasn't a home, but it was clean, calm, and, more importantly, not dangerous. I said yes. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. It was her. "They're here. I'm leaving with them. They're angry." She didn't need to say who was angry. I knew. My father was probably yelling, my mother crying, inventing stories, blaming everyone but themselves. The social worker arranged to meet me at my building. When the car pulled up and she stepped out, for a moment, I didn't know how to react. My sister, shoulders hunched, wearing an oversized hoodie, hair tied back however she could manage. She was holding a backpack that was clearly thrown together at the last minute. She looked at me like she was trying to recognize someone she only knew through old photos and distorted stories. And then, unexpectedly, she walked toward me, slowly, and hugged me. A stiff, tense hug. I hugged her back. It felt awkward, clumsy, but real. The social worker explained the process, the paperwork, the next steps. I listened in autopilot. My mind was stuck on that surreal moment. My sister standing right in front of me, under my responsibility. When we finally went up to the studio, she stepped inside quietly, taking everything in. "It's small," she said. I answered, "I know, but it's safe." For a few seconds, we just looked at each other, strangers with the same blood. "Thank you for believing me." Right there in that cramped studio, a thought appeared in my mind for the first time. Maybe I could actually be her brother now. Maybe there was still a way for us. The first few days with her in my studio were strange. It was like sharing space with someone you know but don't really know at all. The routine started off improvised. I woke up early for my warehouse shift around 6, and she'd wake a little later, usually with her face still puffy from sleep and her hair tied back however she managed. After a week squeezed into that studio, it became obvious we couldn't stay there. The social worker had already warned me that if I wanted to formalize temporary custody, and maybe permanent custody later, I needed a minimally adequate space. I gathered my savings, took extra shifts at the warehouse, and with Marcus and Janelle's help, I found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a quieter neighborhood. The move was exhausting. We carried cheap cardboard boxes up the narrow stairs of the old building. When we walked into the new apartment, her room was small, with a window facing the parking lot, but it had privacy. "It's all yours," I said. She started cooking with me. Nothing fancy. She'd ask me how work was. I'd ask how her day went. Sometimes she talked a lot. Sometimes she said nothing at all. Around that time, we received the first official updates about our parents. The social worker called saying that after the emergency visit and the initial statements, it was confirmed there was severe neglect and an unstable emotional environment. They also discovered piled-up debts, unpaid bills, broken objects around the house, a history of police calls due to fights, and neighbors reporting constant yelling. The part that hit me the hardest was when she said our parents weren't allowed to have direct contact with her for the next few months. It was a court decision, until there was psychological, financial, and behavioral reassessment. "They can't come near her without authorization," she said. I stayed quiet. My sister did too. It was a heavy sentence. Too heavy to digest in one go. The following months passed slowly. In the required meetings with the social worker, I was always reminded that I was carrying a serious responsibility, that raising someone isn't simple, that trauma doesn't disappear just because you move houses. I saw in her the child I once was. As for our parents, I don't know what their future looks like. The last updates we got mentioned mandatory counseling, debts fully exposed in their names, internal fights witnessed by neighbors, and more psychological evaluations before any attempt at reinstating contact. The social worker said the process is slow, that it could take months, maybe years. And honestly, I'm not in a hurry. Neither is my sister. Sometimes she asks if they'll want to see her again. I told her, If that day comes, it has to be the right way, with you safe and with you choosing. I can't erase what they did to me, and I can't erase what they did to her, but I can stop it from continuing. And I'm doing that every day, sometimes stumbling, sometimes tired, but always moving forward.